Hey everyone, Blazam here and welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. If you like what you see today, please like, comment, and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications, and let's get started. Okay, today's build is going to be catered to our new lights joining us today as well as in the future. This is intended to be a starter kit for dungeons and raid settings that immediately adds value to the team's setup. While the build itself is going to be simple in nature, there's always room for optimization as you get more and more comfortable playing the game. Now for a build overview. The build revolves around jolting and defeating combatants to create ionic traces that will consistently recharge our abilities to stay lethal prior to a DPS phase. And during DPS rotations, we can provide more damage to our team comp by providing a steady supply of bolt charge. Now, let's start with the armor set. We're going to be running the 4-piece Lumido Potent set. This set can be farmed via Fireteam Ops and Solo Ops, as well as bought from Zavala. The 2-piece gives our fusions, linears, and heat weapons bonus handling, reload, and vent speeds while you are amplified. This is nice considering that DPS is likely going to have you running a linear. More on the weapons in a little bit. The 4-piece bonus creates ionic traces when we land final blows with either jolt or against jolted targets. Now, since this build is intended to be a jumping off point for Arc Titan raid and dungeon rolls, our exotic of choice will of course be the Curse of the Falling Star to further increase our super's burst damage. As for your stats, I am once again suggesting that you go with Powerhouse Armor, maxing out the weapon stat. While it may seem enticing to go for max super damage, with Thundercrash the time you spend hitting the boss with your super is considerably less in comparison to the time you spend doing damage with weapons. Now this is just based on how I view DPS rotations, so if you prefer to have more super damage over weapons, by all means, it's your Guardian, it's your build, you can do what you want with it. Moving on over to your subclass specifics. Thundercrash is of course our super of choice. Now usually I don't make a hard recommendation on whether to use Towering or Rally Barricade, but in this instance I am recommending you guys go with Rally Barricade. I can't stress this enough. Please do not be the Titan that forgets to have Rally Barricade on and end up killing yourself or the Warlock on the 1000 voices, please. For your aspects, we're going to take Touch of Thunder and Storm's Keep. Touch of Thunder is going to add some additional boost to our grenades. Because of this, I'm opting to also go with Lightning Grenades, as they will jolt targets on the initial blast and provide us with bolt charges when it causes damage. We also get 2 Lightning Grenade charges with this aspect equipped, which is super nice. Storm's Keep is going to supply our team and ourselves with bolt charge once we throw up a Rally Barricade. As we are doing DPS from behind the Rally Barricade, ourselves and our team are going to be accumulating stacks of bolt charge. At max stacks of bolt charges, our damage from our weapons will discharge the accumulated stacks, thus adding more damage overall just for standing behind the Rally Barricade. God, it took me so long to record this part. Now for our fragments, I'm leaning heavily into maintaining bolt charge and jolt uptime. We're going to take Spark of Resistance. This will give us some damage resistance while we are surrounded. This kit doesn't have the best survivability, so having this on does feel nice. The next is going to be Spark of Magnitude. This will give our lightning grenades a longer duration once stuck to a target. We're going to take Spark of Frequency. Melee hits will increase our reload speed and stability for a short duration. The more important note here is that this fragment will also give us increased bolt charge generation from all sources while we are amplified. And lastly, we're going to take Spark of Discharge. Arc Weapon Final Blows have a chance to make an Ionic Trace. Now I know our armor set also does this by just jolting or defeating jolted targets. What's really important with this fragment is that it gives us bolt charges when we make these Ionic Traces. Now, moving right on to our artifacts. Now, this is where the build can kind of change depending on what you want to use for your DPS rotation. Again, this version of a Thundercrash build is focusing less on the actual Thundercrash and more on how to further support your weapon damage in a DPS rotation, right? Now, because we have 2 different artifacts to go over, I don't want to tack on more time talking about each artifact. I'm only going to focus on the mods from each artifact that are relevant to our DPS rotation in our build. That being said, aside from the mods that I'm going to specifically mention, use whatever mods are within these 2 artifacts that best suits your playstyle. Now, the Tablet of Ruin is going to be the first one we look at. The key mod to take here is, of course, Particle Reconstruction. Now, in spite of all the changes that have been made to linears and other DPS options that may or may not have made them more viable, because we are trying to capitalize on discharging bolt charge as often as we can, standing behind a Rally Barricade with a linear fusion rifle is still a super consistent and easy way to get damage in a DPS rotation. Now let's talk about particle reconstruction. There are some keynotes to keep in mind here with this mod. The in-game description makes it sound like you are getting bonus damage when what is actually happening is that you are applying a weakened debuff to the target you're hitting with your linear. Now there are 5 stages of this debuff that get applied to a target when you're hitting it with the linear. This caps out to 27.5% of that weakened debuff at max stacks. Now because this is considered a weakening debuff, this will get overridden by higher tiers of that same debuff. So what does this all mean? This means that if you're dealing DPS and you're using a linear and you are actively trying to use particle reconstruction, if someone were to tractor cannon the boss that you're fighting, you are now using the tractor cannon version of the weaken effect over the particle reconstruction effect. This is also the same case with Divinity. If there is a div bubble up and you are using particle reconstruction, Divinity will actually lower the cap on how much of that weaken effect that you can apply down to 15% over 27.5. The last key note to make here is that if you have multiple players using particle reconstruction, they don't add together and give you more and more damage. Only one instance of particle reconstruction is going to be in effect at one time. Now the second artifact we're going to be using is the Slayer Baron Satchel. The 2 main mods you want to be using here are going to be Weaken Clear and Kinetic Impacts. Weaken Clear is going to apply a 25% weaken debuff and also reloads your stowed weapons, and Kinetic Impacts will trigger a kinetic shockwave with sustained damage from grenade launchers. You guys probably know where I'm going with these 2 mods, so now let's talk about the weapons that you want to be running with this build. Now because we have 2 different artifacts supporting 2 different heavy DPS options, we're going to separate the weapon recommendations into both a set for linears and then a set for grenade launchers. So if you're using the Tablet of Ruin and you're going to be using linears for your DPS option, only recommendations here are good arc primaries that roll with perks like Volt Shot or Jolting Feedback. There are a ton of amazing arc weapons these days that you can be using to roll with these perks. Take for example this Out of Bounds. I got this from the Crucible. You can attune this. It also rolls with Accelerated Assault, but it actually dropped with both Volt Shot and Jolting Feedback on the same gun active at the same time. Another good option would be this Point of the Stag bow. I'm not a bow guy, but having successful warm-up and Volt Shot on a bow, it's really satisfying to use. It's Trinity Ghoul at home, you know? But again, for this, because it's your primary, the only recommendation really I'm going to have is just use a weapon that makes sense for the build that you have fun with. Now, of course, our heavy slot is going to be using a linear fusion rifle because of Tablet of Ruin and particle reconstruction. I'm going to make a recommendation to use an arc adaptive burst fusion. Something like this Willful Hamartia. I don't know how to pronounce that. This one drops from trials. This one rolled with high impact reserves and precision instrument. Now that sounds good in theory. I much prefer something that like auto reloads my fusion outside of particle reconstruction, but it's cool. I thought it was going to do more damage than it did. It does, but like not a crazy amount. Another good option to go for that doesn't require you to suffer in trials would be Storm Chaser from Duality. Now the reason I'm recommending you use one of the burst fire linear fusion rifles is because particle reconstruction activates based on the hits that you make on the target. This means that if you were to use a normal one, something like Taipan, each shot would apply the next stage of the debuff. With a adaptive burst linear fusion rifle, because you are hitting the target 3 times, you are actively applying the particle reconstruction effect in one shot 3 times. So at 2 bursts, you are at the max stacks of that debuff effect. Now, moving on to Artifact 2, the Slayer Baron Satchel. Because we are taking weakened clear and kinetic impacts, we need grenade launchers in order to make this really viable for us to use. With this in mind, our energy slot is going to be reserved for a good roll on the Salvager Salvo grenade launcher. This can be attuned and drops from Pinnacle Ops activities, as well as bought from Zavala for Vanguard engrams and ciphers. Now for your salvo, you're looking for rolls that have trickle charge, where getting bolt charge reloads your weapon, and either Vorpal weapon or the new arc perk Gear Shift. Vorpal is more consistent, but Gear Shift has a higher ceiling for damage overall. For our heavy slot, we're going to take Anarchy. If you have enough Spoils of Conquest saved up, you could buy Anarchy from the kiosk in the tower, or you could beat Insurrection Prime and then buy it from Honor at the end of that fight. Now here's the synergy at play. Anarchy's main selling point is its exotic trait, Arc Traps, where instead of normal grenade projectiles, you basically shoot these little traps that embed themselves into the ground or into the target. Now its Catalyst, which I don't have unfortunately, provides this weapon with jolting feedback, which is honestly insane. It's a gun that is constantly dealing damage, so it's constantly proccing jolting feedback as well. Now if you have the Catalyst, you want to be doing, I would say, 3 shots into a target at a given time. If you don't, stick with 2 to conserve ammo. Now the traps themselves don't do a lot of damage on their own, but when combined with a Salvager Salvo with Trickle Charge, either Vorpal or Gear Shift, weakened clear, and kinetic impacts, and, almost forgot, the constant stream of bolt charges from sitting behind your rally barricade, you now have a very respectable DPS option that doesn't require you to hit crits. It's super fun, it's very satisfying to use, and it is, at least for players like myself, it's a nice change of pace from having to just run a linear, which mind you has been like the gold standard for DPS across the board in every single activity. Aside from, like, I don't know, the Vesper Host Servitor boss, where it's actually recommended to use Glacial Quake and a Wave Frame Heavy Grenade Launcher. Insane, but here we are. But that about wraps it up for us today. Again, this build is meant to be a starter kit for someone who wants to get into dungeon and raiding, but doesn't quite know how they can actually contribute to the team. When in doubt, Thunder Crash out. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week.